Chapter 10, Solution to Bloodline Conflict. CH10 Solution to Bloodline Conflict. ****. There's something different about you, Zora said, eyeing Alex closely. Indeed, Alex admitted without hesitation. Is that why you didn't tell me you were being bullied? Part of it. Zora didn't look pleased with the response. If I had told you, you would have intervened, Alex added. And that's a bad thing. I know you mean well, Lady Zora. But there are some challenges I need to face on my own. You can't protect me from everything, and nor should you. Zora pursed her lips at his words. Besides, this time, the bullying was under my control. I allowed them to bully me, because I needed it. What do you mean? Zora finally took a proper look at Alex, and noticed the changes. You. Oh, you've fully awakened and manifested your bloodline on your own? That's a surprise, a deep voice interrupted. The Dragonhold Enclave's Tower Master, Merlin Pendragon, stepped out of a portal. I didn't expect such a pleasant surprise after returning from collecting compensation from the Wastelanders, he added, then noticed the tension in the air. What? Did I interrupt something? Alex resisted the urge to facepalm. I was just about to tell her about my bloodline awakening. You ruined the moment, Master. Is that so? Merlin shrugged and walked over. He grabbed Alex's wrist, and Alex instantly felt something invade his body. Don't resist. I'm checking your condition, Merlin instructed. His frown deepened as he assessed Alex's state, but he said nothing about it. So, how does it feel to finally awaken your Furor bloodline? Turbulent, Alex sighed. I had to get beaten repeatedly while staying calm through the rage just to rouse it. I felt filthy, my skin crawled. But I endured it. Only when the bloodline reached its limit and threatened to erupt did I finally fight back, intentionally. It kept pushing for a brutal retaliation before it would settle. That's why you severed his arm, even with Grand Mags present? Zora asked. Yes, Alex nodded. I thought it was to make a statement. It was that too. Zora massaged her temples. Let me get this straight. After I warned you about the grumbling regarding your grant, you got bullied by Marcus Hatarian. During that time, your dormant bloodline began to stir. So, you devised a plan that not only awakened your bloodline, but also resolved your grant problem, humiliated your attackers, and improved your reputation. Yes, that sounds about right. Zora stared at him, speechless. I guess it's my fault for thinking you were a normal 10-year-old. Is it your Furor bloodline that makes you so different? Or just you? Alex chuckled wryly, choosing to take the rhetorical question in stride. He quickly shifted the topic. Master, even after rousing my bloodline, I still had to enter the bloodline space to complete the awakening. He explained his experience in the bloodline space to Merlin. Isn't it strange that the Furor bloodline was able to drag me in even before it fully awakened? No, you've got it backward, Merlin replied. What's strange is that you needed to enter the bloodline space to awaken it. It sounds to me like your Furor bloodline did awaken during your family's ceremony, but chose to go dormant afterward. That would explain why you couldn't show its traits in the latter half of the ceremony. My other bloodline was similar, Alex added. It was the potion I received during the talent examination that triggered it. Is it possible that they both went dormant to protect me? Why do you think that? Zora asked. It was just a feeling I got in the bloodline space. The two bloodlines felt antithetical, like positive and negative charges repelling each other. They wouldn't mix. You're not far off, Merlin said gravely. Your situation is dangerous. While dual bloodlines seem advantageous, in your case, it's a problem. Normally, one bloodline dominates and suppresses the other, achieving balance. But in your case, both are equally powerful and completely opposed. Your Furor bloodline leans toward the warrior path, aggression, and negative energy. The other, by contrast, is gentle, aligned with the mage path and positive energy. They clash in every conceivable way. The fact that you inherited both and survived, it's a miracle. Zora's eyes widened slightly. They're coexisting for now only because they know your body can't handle a direct clash. But that truce won't last forever. Sooner or later, they will battle for dominance. Alex's gaze darkened. Was it a mistake to awaken the Furor bloodline so soon? He wondered. No. I had to. Without it, I wouldn't be acknowledged as a Fury, and let's be honest, in stories like this, I'll probably need that family connection eventually, whether I want it or not. What should I do? Merlin fell silent for a moment, deep in thought. There are several ways to solve your situation, he finally said. They fall into 3 categories. He raised 3 fingers. Cleanse, assimilate, or balance. Cleansing would remove one of the bloodlines and eliminate the source of conflict. Alex shook his head immediately. No. It was one thing if he had never awakened either of his bloodlines. But now that he had, Alex wasn't willing to give up on either. Both were incredibly useful, no matter which path he chose to walk. We can help one of your bloodlines assimilate the other, Merlin said. This would result in a mutated bloodline that retains all the traits of the dominant one, plus some from the assimilated bloodline. You can think of it as a limited fusion, he added. Alex found this option far more acceptable than the first. But there's a major drawback, Merlin warned. Your body must be strong enough to survive the process. The 2 bloodlines will battle inside you, one fighting to dominate, the other to resist assimilation. The stress could tear you apart. Alex frowned. And the last method, balance. We can use a method or introduce a third-party element to forcibly stabilize the 2 bloodlines and keep them under your control. If we're lucky, this might even lead to a full fusion. Alex's eyes lit up at the possibility. Don't get too excited, kid, Merlin said with a scoff. That method is ridiculously expensive. I'd have to raid my own private stash for the materials. Your father's payment doesn't even come close to covering it. And with the odds of success so low, it's not a good investment. In short, Merlin had no reason to fund the procedure. But before Alex could despair, the old man added, there is a way I'd be willing to give you the materials. For free, even. How? Alex practically lunged at him. There's no point explaining unless you meet the condition first, Merlin said coolly. Show me that your Rune-Tech is truly viable. Only then will I consider it. Alex paused, then nodded. Nothing had changed. If anything, he now had one more reason to succeed. In that case, Merlin said, his tone turning sharp, let's make things more interesting. You've already used up 3 months of your 1-year deadline. That leaves you 9 months to deliver a working proof of concept for Rune-Tech. If you fail, I will personally determine your future path and how we solve your bloodline problem. Failures don't get a say. Zora frowned at Merlin's harsh tone, but a subtle glance from him silenced her. There is a safer option, Merlin added. You've already accessed your bloodline space. With your level of spiritual force, you have the potential to become a warlock. Both your bloodlines are potent and powerful. As a warlock, you'll definitely achieve greatness over time. Better to walk a proven path than gamble on the unknown. Alex smiled inwardly. With my past life's knowledge and experience, Rune-Tech isn't a gamble. It's the safest bet I've got. Aloud, he said, I have a trait. Once I commit to something, I see it through. I've already started on this path, and I won't stop until I give it everything I've got. I'd rather risk everything to invent Rune-Tech than live a life full of what ifs. If I fail, I'll accept whatever future you choose for me. Very well, Merlin said with a nod. If you plan to use the Morrow crystal from the grimoire you won in the duel, Zora suggested, you should have the Tower Master extract it for you. Merlin raised an eyebrow. Why do you need a Morrow crystal? Alex gave a quick rundown of his Rune-Tech progress and explained his shift in development strategy. Zora also filled Merlin in on Alex's surprisingly cordial relationship with Pinchcoin. Winning over Pinchcoin? Smart move. That'll make things much easier, Merlin said with approval. He accepted the grimoire from Zora, who had retrieved it for Alex after the duel. Grade 8 spell, Extraction. Alex watched in awe as Merlin instant cast a grade 8 spell, a feat that would drain even a great mage's mana and spiritual force, assuming they could cast it at all. A glowing crystal orb detached from the grimoire and levitated into the air before flying into Alex's hands. The rest of the grimoire crumbled into ash. "Did you get a good look?" Merlin asked. Alex shook his head. "Not really. I didn't fully grasp what I was seeing, but it was fascinating." "That's because extraction is a high-level alchemical spell used to isolate rare materials from crafted items," Merlin explained. "It's one of the more complex grade 8 spells. Some say it rivals grade 9 spells in difficulty. Only a handful of mags know how to cast it. If it were anyone else," he added, "it would have been simpler to just hand over another Morrow crystal." "In other words, you took the opportunity to flex in front of your student," Alex thought wryly. "The cost of extracting the crystal, is it the destruction of the item itself?" Alex asked. "Yes. You're defying the natural order, so something must be sacrificed." "Makes sense. That also explains why the spell is so difficult and mana-intensive," Alex muttered thoughtfully. The trio exchanged a few more words, mostly about Alex's nutritional needs to help him recover from his bloodline awakening and prepare for whatever came next. Then, excited to test his new toy, Alex left the room with a spark in his eyes. Chapter 11, Runic Compiler. CH11 Runic Compiler. *****. After Alex left, Zora turned to Merlin. "I told you, I've given up on that matter. I don't want you using my problem as a reason to withhold help from Alex like you said you might. If you do, I'll be furious." "This daughter of mine, how badly do you see me?" Merlin asked with a dry chuckle. "A rogue dragon," Zora replied without missing a beat. Merlin's lips twitched. He shook his head and sighed. "Humans have all kinds of personalities. Some need to be nurtured and gently guided. Others prefer to figure things out themselves, in their own way. Alex is clearly the latter. For people like him, the best way to help is to point out a path and then challenge them with an impossible task. That's how they grow." "I'm starting to understand that," Zora admitted. "But what if he actually fails your impossible task? You'd better not harm him because of it." "Don't worry," Merlin replied. "Just a little punishment. For better or worse, he's my student. And it reflects badly on me if any of my disciples turn out to be a waste." Zora gave a reluctant nod and returned to her seat, resuming the work on her desk. Merlin, however, continued to stare at her for a while. "What is it?" she asked, unable to ignore his gaze any longer. "I just find it strange. You've been acting different since you met the boy. Did he really trigger your maternal instincts?" A vein pulsed on Zora's forehead, but she managed to stay calm. "Father, do you remember what we discussed about making tactless comments?" "Yeah." Merlin blinked. Then his eyes widened slightly. "Oh, I did it again." Zora nodded slowly. "Ehem. My apologies," he said sheepishly. Zora sighed. This was simply the kind of person Merlin was, frustrating, but well-meaning. Still, she addressed his earlier point. "His bloodline soothes me," she said quietly. "Really?" Merlin sounded surprised, pleasantly so. Zora nodded. "Also, I think it's because his bloodline problem mirrors mine. I feel a kind of kinship with him. Putting those together, I can't help but look at him fondly. I think of him as a little brother, not a child." Unfortunately, it seemed the last part of her words went unheard. Merlin had already drifted into thought. His eyes lit up as he summoned a portal with a wave of his hand. "Tell Pinchcoin the Wastelanders will be coming by to discuss compensation. Have him handle it personally," he said before vanishing into the portal. Zora rubbed her temples. Her words had clearly fallen on deaf ears. She knew her adoptive father was likely scheming something to help her with her condition again. And while she appreciated it, she also wished he'd stop. Few things hurt more than being given hope, only to have it snatched away again. She was tired of the repeated heartbreak that came with the promise of a cure. But Merlin was simply too stubborn to let her give up. Alex returned to his dorm and found that someone from the task hall had delivered his meals for the day. Ever since Asta had left on an enclave mission a month ago, Alex had requested the task hall deliver all his meals at once. He had a stasis circle in his storage room that could preserve the food's freshness and warmth for a couple of days, so it wasn't a problem. Still, he couldn't help thinking about Asta as he accepted the delivery. Unlike Alex, who came from a wealthy noble house that could afford to support his education, Asta was self-sponsored. Her family sent her a modest allowance, but it was barely enough to cover a fraction of her expenses at the enclave. To support herself and continue her studies, she took on multiple jobs from the task hall. That was why, despite being 6 years older than Alex, she was still stuck at the mid-novice stage, same as him. She simply didn't have access to the same resources. Alex had tried to help her financially, but to his surprise, the girl who flirted so openly with him turned him down. Playing around was one thing, but taking his money for nothing? That was a line she wouldn't cross. Alex quickly realized that while she may be poor, Asta had her pride. So instead, they struck a deal. He would pay her for rumors and intelligence on the goings-on within the tower. Since Alex rarely left his room except for classes or visiting the Tower Master's office, being wholly focused on developing Rune-Tech, the deal benefited both sides. Still, there was a limit to how much a low-ranked acolyte's information was worth. Asta refused to take more than that, so she still had to take on dangerous missions to make ends meet. The extra income from Alex had at least allowed her to buy a decent wand, enabling her to accept more challenging and better-paying jobs. In fact, the wand Alex had taken from Marcus Hatarian was meant for her. He had no use for it. Wands helped mags focus their spiritual force and reduce casting times. But Alex's spiritual force was abnormally strong enough for him to instant cast spells, so a wand was redundant for him. For Asta, however, it would be a game changer. Now, the only issue was figuring out how to get the proud girl to accept the gift. After all, this was the personal wand of an earl's son. And it was anything but ordinary. After a hearty meal, Alex headed to one of the specialized labs within his residence, the designated site for his next phase of Rune-Tech development. He placed the materials he intended to use onto a long work table, then stood still, deep in thought. The foundation of my Rune-Tech project is a self-learning program. To put it simply, it's like trying to create an AI from scratch. If I follow that analogy, my previous attempt was like trying to write constantly changing code on paper, a dynamic process forced onto a static medium. The right software on the wrong hardware. Alex tapped his fingers rhythmically on the table. If that's the case, my first correction should be the medium, the hardware. He exhaled and sank deeper into thought. I'm trying to introduce computing into this world. The easiest way is to build something analogous to a computer. I don't need to replicate Earth's computers perfectly. I just need a functional equivalent here. A computer is a fusion of hardware and software. Runes form the basis of my programming language, the software. So for the hardware, I need something capable of receiving dynamic runic input. It must allow post-inscription alteration. The Morrow Crystal and Tear of Zon fit that description, for now. But he had concerns. According to my research, the Morrow Crystal will eventually become a bottleneck. It's comparable to a first-gen computer, while the software I envision demands supercomputer-tier performance. Even if the Tear of Zon is superior, it's still a naturally occurring material. Its limitations are unavoidable. At best, it's a high-end PC, not even close to the heavy-duty machine I'll need later. His tapping quickened. If natural materials won't cut it, then I'll need something artificial. But that introduces a new issue. Any man-made material more powerful than the Tear of Zon would be ridiculously expensive. My current grant likely wouldn't cover it. Even if it could, I doubt I'd be granted access due to my level. So my only options are to build it myself, or find someone who can. Either way, I'll need a solid understanding of this world's manufacturing processes to create a feasible schematic. He closed his eyes and accessed the contents of his memory palace, enhanced by the eidetic memory ability of his eyes. I'll need knowledge in material science and device engineering. Alchemy should cover material science, especially material alchemy. As for engineering, forgesmithing seems to be the closest field. But that's a problem. Alchemy is mage-based, so it'll be easy to find in the enclave. Forgesmithing, though, is a warrior-oriented profession. It might not exist within the mage tower. He weighed his options. I can't find a definite solution right now. I'll consult Zora or Master Merlin later. Either way, that's a problem for the future. The Morrow Crystal and Tear of Zon should suffice for the present. He moved on. Besides, if this were a novel, I'd be the main character. And according to the law of cliché, a solution will somehow fall into my lap later. He chuckled lightly at the thought. All right, that's the hardware. Now for the software. If I'm right, neither the Morrow Crystal nor the Tear of Zon can handle complex programming. If I dump an advanced program into it now, I'll just repeat my earlier mistake. So instead, I'll start with a basic, modular program, something I can build on over time. It'll be slower, but far more stable. I'll test and iterate with each improvement. That way, I avoid wasting months again just to watch the whole thing collapse. He turned to the crystal Merlin had extracted. Based on my research, the stronger the user's spiritual force, the more effectively the Morrow Crystal can be utilized, and the fewer support materials are required. Zora indeed introduced me to the most compatible material class for my attributes. With this, I can inscribe runes, modify them into circuits or arrays, and activate them to observe their effects. And it has memory storage. Runes stored inside remain active-ready unless overwritten or beyond capacity. Combined with my eidetic memory, I can track and analyze every change and outcome. He nodded to himself. In that case, I'm ready. He prepared his inscription ink, made from carefully mixed support materials, and set it aside. Then he sat down to meditate, restoring both mana and spiritual force to their peak. Once recovered, Alex began. The first step is inputting all the runes I know into the crystal. It's dry, repetitive work, but absolutely essential if I want to treat runes as usable code. And so began the painstaking process. He channeled mana into the inscription ink and used his spiritual force to guide it, inscribing runes directly onto the Morrow Crystal. The time needed to inscribe each rune varied with complexity and Alex's familiarity. Some took seconds, others minutes. A few complex ones demanded hours of precision work. For the foreseeable future, his time was spent devouring new runes, then inscribing them into the crystal. Like that, time passed, slow to some, fast to others. For Alex, it simply flowed. Over a month later, when a subordinate of Pinchcoin delivered the package containing the Tear of Zon, Alex's grind had borne fruit. The device, simple in appearance but intricate in design, stood proudly on his table. He called it Runic Compiler. Chapter 12, CH12, Transfer Dilemma. Asterisk. Transfer Dilemma. Alex woke up, as usual, to the vibrant world of ambient mana. The prismatic splendor that filled his vision every morning was one of the things he loved most about the spirit sight ability granted by his truth-seeker eyes. It was a constant reminder of his goals in this world, a daily dose of motivation. That awe-inspiring sight was one of the reasons he had chosen the name Truth-Seeker for his ocular mutation. Whether it was spirit sight, enhanced vision, or eidetic memory, every ability awakened by his eyes seemed to support one singular pursuit: power. And according to his father, Earl Drake Fury, power was the ultimate truth of this world. Hence, the name, Truth-Seeker. Alex couldn't help but feel proud of the name. It was one of his better naming choices. Considering his usual naming sense, well, the less said about it, the better. He was also confident that the trend would continue. He could instinctively feel that his eyes would awaken even more support abilities in the future. After completing his morning routine, Alex welcomed Asta, who had just arrived with his meal. It had been a month and a half since the infamous duel between him and Marcus Haterian, and Asta had long since returned from her assigned mission. From the way she was beaming for days afterward, Alex could guess the mission had gone well, and that she had been compensated generously. As always, Asta was astonished by the sheer amount of food prepared for him. She still hadn't gotten used to how a 10-year-old could eat that much and not explode. Part of her task was to make sure Alex ate everything. So she sat nearby as he ate and gave him her usual report of gossip, news, and rumors circulating the enclave and beyond. Last month, she began, Duke Wastelander delayed the celebration of his advancement to the legendary rank by nearly a week. Rumor says he sustained injuries after trying to change his class. Apparently, he shifted from a Saint Bulwark warrior to a legendary arcane knight. Alex's lips curled into a subtle smirk. Wastelander. That should be the head of the family that helmet belongs to. The same one that tried to scheme against me. And that timeline. It lines up perfectly with when Master went to collect his compensation from the Wastelander family. Don't tell me. The great Duke Wastelander was so terrified of Master Merlin that he switched from a pure defense class to an anti-mage class just to survive? He actually gave up his future growth potential out of fear? Hilarious. Asta continued her report while Alex mused to himself. Earl Hatarian has requested a ceasefire with Countess Megan Fury. He's officially surrendered the territories he lost during their skirmishes in exchange for peace. Then, with a playful glint in her eye, Asta leaned closer, the neckline of her blouse offering an intentional view of her budding cleavage. Her voice lowered conspiratorially. I heard someone at the inn say the Mad Earl, Earl Drake Fury, sent one of his hounds to pay Hatarian a visit. The Earl called for a truce not long after the hound left. Alex raised an eyebrow in surprise. So you're still watching over me, even after cutting off all contact? What are you, a Tsunder? He nearly chuckled. The Hounds must be the name of that elite squad of 15 saint-ranked warriors and Grand Mags under Father's direct command. The one that Jard is a part of. Do you know why people call Earl Drake Fury the Mad Earl? Alex asked casually. No clue, Asta replied with a shrug. I heard the Fury family are all crazy. Maybe it's just because he's the only Earl among them. Or maybe he's the craziest of them all. Alex nearly laughed. From his interactions with her, it was clear Asta had no idea who he truly was. She didn't know he belonged to that infamous family of lunatics, nor that he was the Tower Master's disciple. She simply assumed he came from a powerful noble family based on the resources being poured into him. As for the specifics, she hadn't bothered to dig deeper. Alex couldn't decide if it was due to her carelessness, pride, or caution. But since their friendship had nothing to do with backgrounds, he never brought it up. Nor did he ask about her past either. Oh, I also heard that some orcs got into a fight with a group of human mags, Asta continued. Word is, the tension might be linked to some dispute between Grand Warlock Agrut and Grand Mage Roderick. You should be careful. Orcs can get really scary when they're riled up. I'll keep that in mind, Alex said, non-committally. He knew better. It wasn't a racial conflict. It was a factional power struggle between Roderick and Agrut. But to the lower-ranked mags and acolytes, it seemed racial, especially since Agrut's faction represented most of the orcs in the enclave, while Roderick's faction led a large segment of the human population, which made up the majority of the enclave's inhabitants. Still, if things got worse, the Tower authorities would have to intervene before the conflict spiraled out of control. That's their problem, Alex thought. Not mine. Asta shared a few more hot rumors, though most were irrelevant to him. The only noteworthy one was that Helmut Wastelander had left the Tower, officially to attend Duke Wastelander's celebration of reaching the legendary rank. Alex smirked inwardly. That's definitely a cover. He was probably summoned home for punishment after his reckless stunt interfered with the Duke's advancement. Just as Asta was preparing to leave, Alex finally found an excuse to offer her the wand he'd won from Marcus Hatarian. The wand's appearance had changed significantly. Alex wasn't stupid enough to give her a wand that was easily identifiable. Sorry, I can't accept that, she said, immediately backing away. I don't want our relationship turning into something where I'm just taking handouts from you. Alex tilted his head. Do you consider me a friend? Of course, Asta answered without hesitation. Then take it, Alex said firmly. According to you, things outside are tense right now. I won't be at ease unless I know you have something to protect yourself with. He held the wand out. You don't even have to use it as your main weapon. Just keep it as a trump card, for emergencies only. Then he added the finishing blow, a perfected, fatal, baby-faced pleading expression. As expected, Asta folded under the pressure of his ultimate weapon. Fine. I'll take it, she muttered, defeated. Before he could tease her, she quickly hugged him and rushed out the door. Alex had a faint smile as he watched Asta leave. Then he shuddered slightly and wiped away a non-existent cold sweat. I know I'm a kid right now, but I'm also an old soul. Acting like a child still feels unbearably cringy, he muttered. Well, at least it was for a good cause. Shaking off the thought, he turned to something far more important. Alex entered his dorm's specialized runesmithing lab, his personal Rune-Tech workshop, to check the progress on his project. Over the past 1.5 months, he had successfully inscribed most of the basic runes available from the Enclave's archives into the rune compiler. As for intermediate or advanced runes, he hadn't touched them yet. If he were to compare it to something from his past life, he'd say runes were like language. Basic runes were equivalent to common, everyday vocabulary, simple and universally used. Intermediate runes were like native-level expressions, used in more specific or nuanced situations. Advanced runes? They were specialized jargon, like medical or legal terminology, understood only by experts in the field. In any case, for now, Alex only needed the basic conversation tier to move on to the next step of his Rune-Tech plan. Writing a simple, functioning rune-based program to prove runes could be used as a legitimate programming language. Adding intermediate or advanced runes now would just overcomplicate things. Not that he could, even if he wanted to. Just filling in the basic runes had already maxed out the capacity of the Morrow Crystal. Thankfully, the Tear of Zon had arrived just in time to solve that problem. But that opened up a new issue. Although he could transfer the data from the Morrow Crystal to the Tear of Zon by connecting them directly, the process was agonizingly slow. Going back to his old-world analogy, it was like trying to upload a file using a first-generation computer. Best-case scenario? 5 minutes per megabyte. 1 gigabyte? More than 3 days. To someone who once worked with lightning-fast processors, it was nothing short of digital torture. Still, it was better than starting from scratch and repeating nearly 2 months of work. This is what I get for taking ancient people's words at face value, Alex thought wryly. After all, in this world, fast meant something very different than it did back on Earth. He'd been told the transfer was very fast, which was why he hadn't waited for the Tear of Zon to arrive before starting his work. If he'd known that this world's definition of fast was drastically different from his own, maybe, just maybe, he would have reconsidered. No, that's not quite right. Alex shook his head. I wouldn't have been able to sit still and wait anyway. The real problem wasn't the current transfer. It was the fact that he'd likely have to perform many such transfers in the future. And as his work advanced, the volume of data he needed to move would increase significantly. He wasn't comfortable losing huge chunks of time just waiting for data transfers to complete. I need to find a solution, or at least a workaround. Unfortunately, no matter how hard he racked his brain, no useful ideas surfaced. In fact, it felt like the more he thought about it, the farther he drifted from inspiration. Sometimes the best ideas aren't forced. You have to let them come to you. A change of scenery helps. Zora's advice from over a month ago, when they stood atop the central tower, resurfaced in his mind. Alex let out a sigh. Maybe she's right. I've mostly been cooped up here whenever I'm not in class. Whether it's for my health or my creativity, maybe I really do need to go outside and touch grass once in a while. He chuckled wryly. With that, he began packing up the materials he'd planned to use. He'd moved more supplies from the storehouse than the lab's shelves were designed to hold. Rather than making several back-and-forth trips between the lab and the storehouse, he opted to fold and press down the materials he could safely compress to create more space. He was in the middle of pressing down a bundle of rolled beast hides, trying to make room for one more, when a spark lit up in his mind. Compression. Chapter 13. Tribulation of Heavenly Secrets. Ch 13. Tribulation of Heavenly Secrets. ******. Alex froze as the idea struck him. Yes, compression. It'll take significantly less time if I compress the file. Just like he'd pressed and rolled the beast's skins to occupy less space, he could apply the same principle to his data. By developing a compression tool, he could reduce the file size and accelerate transfer times. Fortunately, I've already created my own compression tools in the past. And this just so happens to count as a valid program. If I can write it and make it work, I'll have achieved the next phase of the Rune-Tech project. Proof that runic formations can function as a programming language. Excitement surged through him like fire in his veins. He immediately halted the ongoing transfer to the Tear of Zon and began focusing on manipulating the runes inside the Morrow crystal, essentially writing a code, shaping them into an internal runic array that would operate like a compression program. With his prior experience building different types of compression tools in his past life, it wasn't hard for Alex to translate conditional logic and rules into a theoretical runic framework. The real challenge lay not in conceptualization, but in execution. The intensity of his motivation burned so brightly that if Zora or Asta had been present, they might have claimed they could see it glowing around him. That passion drove him to complete what should have been a week's worth of grueling effort in just 3 days. Everything looks good, Alex muttered after carefully cross-checking his work. He sat down, taking time to meditate and restore his spiritual force and mana to peak levels. Once his energy returned, he prepared to execute the first proper runic program ever written in this world. The array inscribed within the Morrow crystal was unlike any physical runic formation found in traditional spellcraft. Drawn in the real world, it would do absolutely nothing. It was a program designed to function solely within mediums like the Morrow crystal, Tear of Zon, or similar vessels. In other words, Alex had just created the first digital rune array. Now, the moment of truth. Let's see if it works as intended. He channeled a substantial portion of his spiritual force, along with a bit of mana, into the Morrow crystal. In response, a circular runic array manifested in the ethereal inner space of the crystal. Surrounding it were countless individual basic runes, each floating densely in the digital space. His spiritual force extended like a thin silver thread. Under his precise control, it slithered through the sea of runes and touched the array circle. The array lit up, pulsating with both his spiritual force and mana. Alex watched closely as the radiance intensified. Then, the entire array collapsed in on itself, warping into a vortex. No, a singularity. A swirling maelstrom formed, drawing in every surrounding rune with a strong gravitational pull. Alex lost track of time, utterly fixated on the process. Eventually, all the runes had been absorbed into the vortex, leaving behind only the singularity at the center of the now empty digital space. Then, that too began to fade, shrinking, dimming, vanishing. And then, nothing happened. Why is nothing happening? Alex's chest tightened. Panic began to claw at his mind. Almost 2 months of work. Was it all for nothing? He clenched his fists, just short of activating the array again when his spiritual force twitched violently. The ethereal space trembled. Cracks formed where the singularity had last existed. In the next instant, space itself shattered like glass, revealing a new figure floating in the center. It was a rune. But unlike anything Alex had ever seen before, its form defied conventional geometry, shifting and multifaceted. Its complexity surpassed even the most elaborate advanced runes he'd studied. From his rune knowledge, one thing was clear. This wasn't just a new rune. It was something far greater. Alex could instinctively tell that this single rune held immense power. So much so that had it formed in the real world, it would have shaken the very foundation of reality itself. A cold sensation crawled up his spine. This rune, it shouldn't exist here. The world itself might reject it. Boom! Before Alex could continue observing, a violent force struck his mind space like a hammer. His concentration shattered instantly, severing the thread of spiritual force connected to the Morrow crystal. Darkness consumed him as he collapsed on the spot. Unbeknownst to Alex, the real world responded violently to the activation of his compression array circle. A massive shift occurred. Dark clouds surged across the entirety of Dragonhold Enclave. From the towering peaks of the Dragonspine mountain range to the glittering bay where the Aegean River's tributary met the sea, everything fell beneath the shadow of the storm. Where moments ago bright afternoon sun graced the land, now gloom descended, a foreboding omen of something far beyond a simple change in weather. Streaks of golden-red lightning twisted through the clouds, forming increasingly dense spirals of electric fury. Then, something emerged. A serpentine being composed entirely of lightning uncoiled itself from the heart of the storm. Its head poked out of the clouds and its eyes, piercing orbs of paradoxical calm, indifference and joyous amusement, locked onto a single point. That point was none other Alex's dormitory. Terror, unease, instinctive fear. These emotions rippled across the enclave like a tidal wave. Residents screamed, some trying to flee, others dropping to their knees. It didn't matter if they were low-ranked peasant or high-ranked mags. Every soul was gripped by a primal panic. Even the great and grand mags, those who stood at the pinnacle of magical authority within the enclave, were paralyzed. They couldn't cast. Not even a spark. Spells fizzled in their throats. Their enchantments failed to activate. The great array formations layered across the enclave's buildings and defenses were rendered inert. Mana still flowed, but anything requiring runes, spells, formations, enchantments, had ceased functioning. A terrifying realization dawned on the upper echelon. This phenomenon suppressed everything that relied on runic structure. And so, with desperation rising and power rendered useless, all eyes turned toward the central tower. To the one man who might stand against this unprecedented force. The Tower Master. The legendary mage. Merlin Pendragon. Zora was, for once, enjoying a rare moment of peace. The ever-growing stack of paperwork she typically managed in Merlin's absence was gone for the day. No reports. No briefings. No emergencies. She sipped tea beside the grand arched window, basking in the beauty of a quiet, tranquil afternoon. It was serene. Perfect even. Until it wasn't. In the blink of an eye, the sky darkened. Her body tensed before her mind even registered the shift. The teacup slipped from her fingers and shattered against the floor. But unlike the others in the enclave, the shudder that passed through Zora wasn't fear. It was something deeper. Something older. Reverence. And what unsettled her most was that she didn't understand why. Deep within a hidden lair nestled somewhere in the enclave, the unknown behemoth stirred. Its slow, rhythmic breathing had long echoed through the cave, signaling a slumber so deep that no ordinary disturbance could wake it. Until now, the very space around it trembled. The beast's enormous eyes snapped open, glowing with primal fury as it unleashed a thunderous roar. The force of its cry shook the cavern violently, akin to an earthquake of the highest magnitude. Yet, a counterforce emerged immediately, an unseen power that suppressed the aftershocks, preserving the integrity of the lair. A voice rang out, calm but absolute. "Who dares tamper with the taboos of the natural order within my enclave?" said Merlin. The old man materialized near the creature's silhouette as if he'd been there all along. The beast's rage waned the moment its eyes fell upon the legendary mage. Though it did not move, its glowing gaze remained locked, piercing through the cave's darkness, through space itself, as if it could see the world beyond. Its eyes flashed, not just with primal instinct, but with surprise and confusion. Then they softened, pensive, contemplative. Merlin, meanwhile, opened a portal and vanished, only to reappear moments later in front of Zora. Unlike lesser mags, the phenomenon that restricted spellcasting had no hold over him. Merlin Pendragon, as a legendary mage, operated on a different plane. His spells didn't rely on rune-inscribed spell circles like others. Instead, he manipulated the fundamental laws of the world directly. This was the difference between mortals and legends. Zora, however, remained frozen. Her body trembled uncontrollably, her instincts overwhelmed by the phenomenon unfolding around them. Merlin approached silently and placed a hand on her shoulder. A transparent barrier wrapped around her, shielding her from the oppressive atmosphere. Her trembling ceased. "Father, what's happening?" she asked, voice low and tight. Tribulation of heavenly secrets, Merlin replied, eyes fixed on the sky above. Someone within the enclave has broken through a boundary set by the natural order. His gaze narrowed further as the serpentine figure of lightning took shape in the clouds, crackling with a mystic force. When he saw its eyes, calm, amused, and not the least bit wrathful, his own eyes widened slightly. It's not here to punish, Merlin murmured. It's here to test. A test? Zora echoed, confused. He nodded. Someone has achieved something extraordinary. So extraordinary, it threatens to alter the structure of reality itself. This tribulation isn't retribution. It's the world determining whether that discovery deserves to be woven into the fabric of nature. The world rewards discovery, she asked, astonished. It is fairer than most think. If they pass the test, the benefits will be unimaginable. Zora struggled to fully grasp it all, but one concern overrode the rest. Will the tower be harmed? Merlin smiled gently. No, quite the opposite. If all goes well, we may even gain from the overflow. Their conversation paused as the cloud above shifted once more. The great serpent of lightning withdrew into the clouds. Then, a moment later, a streak of radiant, ethereal lightning descended, fast as thought, toward a location within the enclave. Let's go, Merlin said calmly. Grade 5 spell, Blink. With a silent, seamless gesture, the spell activated. In an instant, Merlin and Zora vanished, reappearing hundreds of meters away at the site of impact. The bolt of lightning was ephemeral in nature. It passed through structures, leaving no trace of destruction in its wake. But when they arrived, what they saw made Zora's breath catch in her throat. Alex's dorm. She didn't wait. Panic gripped her heart as she sprinted forward. The dorm's magical security wards didn't activate, not just because she'd been granted full access, but because none of the arrays were working at all. Besides, as Merlin's majordomo, she held the highest authority in the tower beneath him. Alex, she cried, bursting through the entrance. Zora found Alex unconscious, lying on the floor of his Rune-Tech lab. Arcs of golden lightning flickered across his body, flashing in and out like pulses. She took a step forward, about to rush to his side, when Merlin's hand gently caught her shoulder. Don't touch him, he warned calmly. You'll interfere with the test. Before Zora could even respond, the golden lightning surged and completely submerged into Alex's body. A beam of pure light shot down from the sky, unimpeded by roof, wall, or barrier, and struck Alex directly. He remained unconscious, his body slowly rising into the air as it became encased in a shimmering golden cocoon. The cocoon glowed brilliantly, then began to sink into his body, layer by layer, until a faint, translucent sheen remained upon his skin. Crack! Boom! The cocoon hardened momentarily, then shattered outward in a burst of radiant light, revealing Alex suspended midair, glowing faintly. When the golden hue faded, he gently floated down to the ground. Zora stared, heart pounding. She couldn't tell what had happened, but Merlin smiled faintly. He passed the test. The moment Alex touched the ground, the atmosphere shifted. A beautiful, otherworldly symphony echoed throughout the Dragonhold enclave. It was a song of creation, harmony, and ascension. Everyone who heard it froze. A trance overtook the entire enclave. Each person received a reward, subtle or grand, that perfectly aligned with their deepest needs. Some felt their cultivation rise. Others saw the haze over their comprehension clear in a flash of enlightenment. A few felt unseen injuries mend, or decades-old spiritual knots loosen. The rewards were not equal, but they were all precise. However, no one, not one, could remember what had just occurred. The entire phenomenon vanished from the minds of every soul in the enclave. Every soul except two. Merlin remembered because his strength defied the natural order. Zora remembered because something else had marked her. Ancient, glowing symbols had appeared across her body at the moment of the tribulation. And so, the arrival of one of the plane's mysterious agents, the will of law and reality itself, was forgotten by all, save the two who witnessed it in full. Chapter 14. Greater Rune Omnirune Core. Ch14 Greater Rune Omnirune Core. *****. It was another quarter of an hour after the tribulation of heavenly secrets had receded that Alex finally stirred. The 10-year-old boy jolted upright, clutching his head. A wave of vertigo washed over him, but it quickly faded. "Alex, are you okay?" A familiar voice called out from nearby. "Lady Zora." Alex blinked, stunned. "What are you doing here?" "We should be asking you that," came another voice. "Master." Alex immediately stood and bowed respectfully at Merlin's approach. "What exactly were you doing?" the legendary mage asked calmly. "What was I doing again?" For a moment, Alex struggled to recollect the sequence of events, but then it all came rushing back. "Oh, I made a breakthrough in my Rune-Tech project." Alex launched into a detailed explanation, outlining the data transfer problem he'd encountered and the solution he had devised. He carefully described his thought process, his construction of the ephemeral array, what he now called a digital program, and the resulting compression effect. Most importantly, he mentioned the singular rune it produced, one he had never encountered before. "It radiated so much power I shudder to think what might have happened if it manifested in the real world." Intent on showing Merlin the new rune, Alex reached for the Morrow crystal, only to freeze in horror. The crystal had disintegrated. All that remained was a fine pile of dust. "No!" His red eyes glowed faintly as despair surged within him. The influence of his furor bloodline amplified the emotional impact. A deep rage and sorrow welled up in his chest, threatening to spiral out of control. Suddenly, a wave of foreign mana washed over him. The heat in his blood cooled. His breathing slowed. He turned and saw Zora embracing him, her eyes an icy blue as cold-natured mana spread across the room like a soothing balm. "Have you calmed down?" Her voice was gentler now, almost ethereal. Alex nodded stiffly. He sighed, a mirthless smile on his face. "Thank." He froze mid-word. Something heavy pressed against his consciousness. An unfamiliar weight settled on his mind. He quickly focused his awareness into his mind space. What he saw there caused his expression to transform from solemn to stunned. Then came a grin. Then a laugh. A bright, boyish, boisterous laugh filled the lab, tinged faintly with tears. Zora blinked in confusion as the 10-year-old erupted into laughter, tears brimming in his eyes. "Damn this body. How can you make a grown man cry like this?" The old soul within the boy cursed internally. Whether it was the boy's physiology or something deeper that drew the tears, no one could say. "Looks like you didn't lose your work," Merlin observed with a chuckle. "N." Alex nodded, beaming. Somehow, it moved into my mind. Suspended within his mind space, as though it had always belonged there, was the rune, the mysterious, incomprehensible figure formed from the compressed knowledge of all his basic runes. Now that it resided within him, the rune began to reveal its nature. This rune, it's in a completely different class. It's unlike anything we've seen before. Alex's voice trembled with awe. "I can't even describe it with the geometry or logic I know." "Can you recreate it?" Merlin asked, gently guiding the flow of thought. "No," Alex shook his head. "Its charm, its essence, it's one of a kind. I might be able to copy its form, but not its nature. Still, I think I can create other runes within the same class, though none as powerful." He paused, eyes shining faintly. "And I don't think it's complete. I can feel it yearning for something. It wants to be whole. Do you know what needs to be done?" "I think I've got a pretty good idea," Alex nodded with quiet conviction. Merlin folded his arms, his expression thoughtful. Then he said, "If this rune is truly a new class, something beyond all known runes, then as its creator, the right to name it belongs to you." Ordinarily, Alex would hesitate at the task. Naming things was not one of his strengths. But this time, he already knew the name. And he knew exactly why it had to be called that. "The new class of runes embodies multiple original runes," Alex began, standing straighter as he spoke. "They're clearly more powerful and effective than the originals, so I believe it's apt to classify them as lesser and greater runes. Lesser runes refer to the original runes currently in use, whether basic, intermediate, or advanced, while the newly formed class of runes will be known as greater runes, to signify their superior nature. His voice brimmed with pride. Merlin, however, said nothing. His eyes weren't even on Alex. Instead, they seemed to pierce through the fabric of space, gazing at some distant, unknowable point. Unbeknownst to the boy, Merlin was witnessing something rare. The natural order itself acknowledging the classification. Lesser and greater runes had just become a recognized concept in the world. Completely unaware of the momentous event he'd just triggered, Alex continued speaking. As for the unique rune now residing in my mind space, its nature feels like it can encompass all other runes. And, as my Rune-Tech development advances, I believe I'll be able to imbue it with self-altering properties. For that reason, I've decided to name it the Omnirune Core. Boom! A sudden thunderous sound echoed through his mind space. Alex stiffened. He scanned the ethereal domain with urgency but saw nothing amiss. Meanwhile, Merlin watched quietly as the natural order once again accepted the boy's declaration. The Omnirune Core now existed not just in thought, but as a recognized reality of the world. Names carry weight, Merlin said solemnly. As the discoverer and pioneer of this path, it is your duty to ensure your creations live up to the names you've bestowed upon them. Alex nodded, equally serious. As far as he was concerned, this was merely one milestone along the road to Rune-Tech. He believed, no, he knew, that both Greater Runes and the Omnirune Core would evolve further as he moved closer to realizing his ambitions. I'm even more intrigued to see what you'll show me 7 months from now, Merlin added, smiling. Zora gave him a curious glance but held her tongue. All right then. We'll get out of your hair. Now that we know the explosion from your dorm didn't harm you, there's no reason for us to linger. Merlin conjured a portal with a casual wave of his hand and unceremoniously dragged Zora through it. Alex was left standing alone in his disordered lab. He glanced around at the mess and mused aloud. The birth of the Omnirune Core must have caused the explosion that shattered the Morrow crystal. Luckily, the rune latched onto my spiritual force and got pulled into my mind space during the process. The resulting explosion must have triggered the alarm that alerted Zora. Knowing how much she dotes on me, I wouldn't be surprised if she arranged for tower resources to keep an eye on my dorm. That must be how she caught wind of the incident and called Master Merlin. He looked down at his hands, flexing his fingers slowly. Since I'm not injured, actually, I feel better than ever. She must have healed me with a potion or spell. Alex nodded to himself, satisfied with his deductions. Too bad. He was completely off the mark. Back in the Tower Master's office, Merlin and Zora stepped out of the portal. Why did you lie to him? Zora asked, unable to keep the question in any longer. Because letting him know he triggered a change in the natural order wouldn't do him any good, Merlin replied flatly. There's a reason the tribulation of heavenly secrets erases the memories of all witnesses. He looked out of the tower window, thoughtful. He's still young. Despite the maturity he's shown, he might accidentally let something slip, and if the wrong people hear of it. Zora's expression hardened. She understood. And even if that doesn't happen, I don't want him resting on his laurels just yet, Merlin added. This was a coincidental discovery, not the culmination of his plan. There's no need to praise him prematurely. When he completes the plan, when he either creates something even more groundbreaking or refines this further, then we can tell him. Until then, silence is the best gift we can offer. Zora nodded quietly, her eyes thoughtful. Then, a sudden thought occurred to her. With this achievement, he should have met your requirements for proving the viability of his Rune-Tech, Zora said firmly. There's nothing more to say if even the natural order itself acknowledges it. Fine, I concede. You're not wrong, Merlin admitted, his expression turning solemn. More importantly, his thoughts continued silently. The blessings of the plane have greatly enhanced both his body and his dual bloodlines. But in doing so, they've also worsened his bloodline conflict. I need to act quickly to stabilize his condition. I can't allow a talent capable of influencing the natural order to die from something we can fix. He looked at Zora. Even without you pressing me, I already planned to open my vault. The baptism he received elevated his talent and potential. He's now just about worth spending my stash of materials on. Zora smiled at that. But we can't rush it, Merlin cautioned. I'll have to introduce the materials gradually. Some of them are far from palatable, so I'll rely on you to make sure he actually consumes them. No problem, Zora agreed easily. Besides, Alex is mature enough not to throw a tantrum over bad-tasting food. Merlin nodded. With that settled, the legendary mage turned and stepped through another portal, vanishing to destinations unknown. In the following days, Alex noticed a drastic shift in his diet. Gone were the vast platters of food that could feed a small group. In their place were small, often bite-sized, parcels of highly condensed meals. Alex might have been alarmed had Zora not personally brought over the first serving. Though she didn't explain the reason for the change, she made it abundantly clear that the meals were prepared with some of the rarest materials available, and he was not to waste a single crumb. That included licking any leftover drops of oil from the container. Another peculiar change was Asta's sudden absence during mealtimes. Previously, part of her job involved watching over him while he ate. Now, she had been given explicit orders not to be present during his meals. In fact, Alex was told not to even open his food in the presence of anyone else. Strangely enough, despite the drastically reduced portion sizes, barely half the serving of an average person, at most, he felt more nourished than ever. Full, energized, and strangely light. Which led him to a concerning observation. What exactly is in this food? He wondered. He hadn't had to visit the toilet since starting the new diet. Not once. His body was absorbing every ounce of nutrients, leaving no waste behind. Even Zora was in the dark about the ingredients. The meals were made exclusively by Merlin, who ensured every step of the process was tightly sealed in secrecy. Alex could only suppress his curiosity and redirect his attention back to his Rune-Tech work. After taking an extended break, which, in his hyper-driven mind, amounted to a whole day, he was back in his Rune-Tech lab, ready to dive in once again. Chapter 15. Scarred Duke. Ch 15. Scarred Duke. Asterisk. Axel Castle stood like a granite crown at the very heart of the Wastelander Duchy. Raised upon the Dutch's geographical midpoint, the vast citadel was, in every sense, its pulsing core. Around this grand palace fortress stretched a sprawling city, the official capital, and, until recently, the jubilant stage for Duke Siemund Wastelander's elevation to legendary rank. Even weeks after the formal ceremonies, the streets still throbbed with carnival spirit. Banners hung from every arch, taverns overflowed with patrons toasting "Long live the legend," and minstrels wove tales of Siemunds might late into the night. The simple presence of a living legend within their walls soothed common folk and filled them with giddy pride. Yet, within Axel Castle itself, the mood could not have been more different. Behind iron-reinforced gates and white marble walls, the ducal household moved in tense silence. Servants hushed their voices. Courtiers skirted conversations. Any mention of the ascension, once a point of boundless pride, had become a whispered taboo. Whoosh, thwack. Down in the castle's dark dungeon, a whip sliced through the damp air and cracked across the back of a young man locked into a pillory. Ah! Helmet's scream only spurred on the middle-aged man wielding the whip. Thwack! 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 Each fresh cry earned Helmet another stroke. Unable to endure, he slipped into merciful unconsciousness. Trash! You lose consciousness from a little whipping, snarled the man, Helmet's own father, Duke Siemund Wastelander. Fury twisting his face. Thwack! Ah! The new strike dragged Helmet back to consciousness. Siemund raised the whip again, but a grey-haired butler stepped forward and bowed. Your Grace, forgive the interruption. Young Master Helmet cannot endure more correction just now. May the healers tend him before the lesson continues. The Duke's cold gaze dropped to his son's pale face. Even beaten half-dead, Helmet Wastelander, personal disciple of legendary mage Merlin Pendragon, was still recognizable to anyone from Dragonhold Enclave. Grudgingly, Seamund lowered the whip. 2 Helamags hurried in, knitting flesh and bone with muted incantations. 5 minutes later Helmet was stable, though still shackled. The Duke waved a hand. Guards freed the pillory and propped Helmet upright by the shoulders. "Helmet," Seamund began, voice low with contained wrath. "I asked one thing of you. Forge a connection with Merlin Pendragon. For this, I not only expended my influence, I have also spent tens of millions of gold to ensure you studied under him. Instead of impressing him, you went and provoked him so thoroughly that he stormed my ascension ceremony and shattered a decade of preparation. 5 decades of work all ruined because of your petty scheming. Not only did you offend Merlin Pendragon, you also turned Drake Fury's eyes in my direction. That lowborn dared come to MY Celebration to congratulate me as a senior legend. That lowborn? My senior. It didn't stop there. There were those expressing their worry for me now that Fury has turned his gaze towards me. Worry for Duke Wastelander? Because of a mere upstart? Worst still were those who suggested that I had dealing with him. I have never suffered such humiliation." Seamund's killing intent rolled across the chamber, pressing Helmet's half-healed body against the guard's grip. "Thanks to your foolishness, Merlin's support drifts further from our reach. My perfect path is broken, and I stand mocked throughout the realm. Remember this pain, boy. It is but a shadow of what your recklessness has cost me. Fortunately, you still have some value." Seamund's voice dropped to a frigid murmur. "Barely, but it's there. You remain Merlin's student, which leaves a single bridge between our house and him. I ask little of you. When you crawl back to Dragonhold, I do not expect you to earn Merlin's favor, nor to rise above that pointless alchemist path you chose. All I require is that you stay within his tutelage. Then, when your brother Alric returns, you can serve as the excuse for him to approach Merlin's daughter. Once Alric wins the girl's heart, Merlin will naturally lean towards Wastelander, and this whole fiasco will be forgotten." He flicked his hand. "Take him away." Guards half-carried, half-dragged Helmet from the cell, the Helamags trailing behind to continue their work. In the Duke's study high in Axel Castle, rain drummed against lead-lined windows. The butler cleared his throat. "Our agents have confirmed young Master Helmet's report, Your Grace. The Mad Earl's son enjoys the Dragonslayer's favor and protection. What are your orders?" "Do nothing for the moment," Seamund replied, staring out across his mist-shrouded estate. "Everyone of consequence either knows, or will soon learn, what occurred between that brat and Helmet. Should any incident befall the Fury boy, suspicion would fall on us regardless of how tidy the work. Drake Fury is negligible. Merlin Pendragon, however, is not." "As you command." The butler bowed. Seamund's fist clenched behind his back. When had he, a Duke of the Empire, last been forced to weigh every step so cautiously? And all because his son chose to toy with an upstart's child. Earl Drake Fury himself posed no real threat. Infamy aside, the Fury household lagged far behind the ancient nobility in wealth, influence and military strength. They boasted a single legend, Earl Drake Fury. But in the Wastelander family, Duke Seamund was but the newest legend. Before him, the Wastelander family boosted 3 legends. And these were just the ones known to the public, and carried the Wastelander blood. No one but the family's upper echelons knew just how many legends were hidden within the shadows of the family. If the Mad Earl or even the entire Fury family dared attack the Wastelanders, they would receive a rude awakening and retribution. Yet Merlin Pendragon was a different matter entirely. The Wastelander family and a few select high-ranked families knew something about Merlin Pendragon that was hidden from the public. The dragon Merlin slayed was no ordinary dragon. It wasn't an elemental dragon who rivaled Saint Warriors and Grand Mags just by reaching adulthood. Nor was it a colored dragon that could rival ordinary legends by reaching adulthood. Instead, it was a dragon belonging to a higher class, an elder dragon, and one whose age could only be described as ancient. Ancient elder dragons belonged to a power class that surpassed legendary strength. Even the weakest ill and frail ancient elder dragon would be stronger than a peak legend. Yet, Such a being was killed solo by the legendary mage Merlin Pendragon. Within elite circles, the title Legendary Mage now drew cynical smiles. Most believed Pendragon had long since stepped beyond that realm, deep into whatever lies next. Such a person wasn't someone the Wastelander family could nor were willing to offend. The Wastelander family will abandon Duke Seamund himself if he dared to offend the Dragonslayer. Talk less of punishing or abandoning Helmet. The clan council would sooner discard Duke Seamund himself than provoke the Dragonslayer. The Duke's earlier brutality, twisted as it seemed, was in its own way an act of protection. Has Alric been informed? Seamund asked, breaking from his thoughts. Yes, Your Grace, the butler answered. We have his reply. He says his current plane is delicate. It will be some time before he can return. Did he request support? Seamund's brow furrowed. No, quite the opposite, Your Grace. He refuses reinforcement. According to his report, the natives are obstinate but hardly dangerous. He claims it is only a matter of time before he subdues them for the family. Subdues? That was the exact word. Seamund arched an eyebrow. Yes, Your Grace. Ho ho, so the boy has found a race worth taming. A slow smile tugged at the Duke's lips. Very well. Tell him he may return at his leisure, but he shouldn't forget the plan and keep me waiting for long. I expect results, no excuses. As you wish, Your Grace. Shall I deliver the message myself? No need. The message doesn't deserve such import. Sending someone dependable is enough. Understood. The butler bowed, turned on his heel and left. Alone once more, Duke Seamund Wastelander folded his hands behind his back and gazed through the tall window at the rain-soaked courtyard below. Lantern light shimmered on the wet stone, blurring into amber ribbons. Thoughts churned behind his steely eyes, of Dragonslayers, errant sons, and schemes that now needed to be rewritten. Outside, thunder rolled across the distant moors, but within the study the Duke stood utterly still, plotting his next move in silence. Chapter 16. Mind and Soul of Runes. Ch 16. Mind and Soul of Runes. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. The tribulation of heavenly secrets came and went without leaving a ripple. All residents of Dragonhold Enclave experienced some form of boon, though no one knew why. None recalled anything unusual. They didn't even sense anything amiss. One moment, life was mundane. The next, blessings arrived for no rhyme or reason. Since the Enclave's authorities said nothing, and no one suffered ill effects, everyone soon dismissed the strange occurrence and went about their business. By fate's design, nearly everyone hostile to Alex was away from the tower, attending Duke Seamund Wastelander's Ascension celebration, so none benefited from the boon Alex had caused. The person at the heart of the tribulation remained oblivious to this fortunate coincidence. In fact, he was unaware of the entire event. After a day's rest, he returned to his Rune-Tech project. The discovery of greater runes and the Omnirune core in his mindspace was only a milestone, nothing worth mentioning. Alex tried interacting with the rune in his mindspace, but nothing happened. Either my mindspace isn't conducive to the rune's operation, or it's still too incomplete to function properly, he mused. Whatever the case, the solution is clear. At his Rune-Tech Lab's work table, Alex carefully brought forward the Tear of Zon crystal. The crystal was named so for its tear-like shape and first discovery within the borders of a town called Zon. A town which was destroyed in the battle between three noble families to monopolize the resource. It had been purged of the data previously been transferred from the Morrow crystal. This amounted to less than 1% of the whole dataset, so Alex felt no loss clearing it out. Here goes nothing. He placed the crystal against his forehead and shaped his spiritual force to bridge the Omnirune core and the Tear of Zon crystal. Transfer. Alex ordered mentally. Suddenly, tiny particles, like hairs falling from an oxen, broke off the rune's surface, dropping onto the spiritual force bridge and propelled at high speed into the crystal. This continued rapidly until the rune was stripped of mass, leaving only a transparent outline in mind space. Inside the crystal, Alex found not the greater rune he expected, but the mass cluster of the lesser basic runes and the compressor array circle that had formed the greater rune. It worked. He had achieved high-speed transfer of his runes. But not without cost. A wave of nausea and vertigo hit, and he nearly blacked out. He wished he had, because a massive migraine pounded in his skull. He forced himself into a meditative seat to recover his lost spiritual force. 3 hours later, Alex sighed in relief as his spiritual force overdraft stabilized. "Yeah, not doing that again unless I have to," he muttered. What Alex had just done drained so much spiritual force that if it wasn't for the fact that his soul had the density of 2 souls and a significant reserve of spiritual force, he would have damaged his spiritual force, thus severely harming his future progress. Still, the risk bore fruit. A transfer that should have taken a week completed in an hour. Well, add 3 hours of recovery, and it was a 4-hour process, still far better than a week of waiting. Using your advantages and talents is how you get ahead in the world, Alex said proudly to himself. He turned his focus to the crystal now housing all his basic runes. The same runes that filled the entire capacity of the Morrow crystal barely took up 1/10 of the Tear of Zon's capacity. The next step is simple. The Omnirune wants to be complete. I just need to add the remaining intermediate and advanced runes. With his goal set and materials ready, Alex set to work inscribing intermediate and advanced runes into the Tear of Zon. He wasn't sure if it was the greater rune in his mind space or the after-effects of the bridge transfer, but his spiritual force affinity for rune inscription had improved greatly. At this rate, I'll finish much faster than expected. His motivation surged. True to his usual routine, Alex compressed all his time into sleeping, eating, classes, meetings with Asta, Merlin, and Zora, and rune inscriptions. The inscriptions took the bulk of his time. Intermediate and advanced runes were supposed to be far harder to inscribe than basic runes, at least, that's what he expected. What he projected to take over 3 months, he completed in 2. Compared to his speed and skill when inscribing the basic runes, his current speed and skill were incomparable. Sigh. Alex sighed after completing another hours-long session. He stretched, then a sudden thought struck him. Come to think of it, now that I've inscribed all the common runes, that makes me an elementary runesmith and array master. He rubbed his chin, a gesture odd for his physical age, and mused, with my compression array circle, I can be said to have practical experience with creating and drawing arrays. That would make me an unofficial Tier 1 array master. I just need the certification to make it official. Nah, no thanks. Whether array formations or runesmithing, they're just means to an end, not my chosen path. I'll pick and choose whatever I need from both, but programming and Rune-Tech remain my primary focus. Getting higher tier certifications would require mastering the full technical knowledge of both fields. He had no need for that. He could just learn what helped him create better programmed arrays and rune formations. In fact, he suspected his current basics would suffice. Still, with eidetic memory, it'd be a waste not to soak up knowledge while I'm still here studying at the Mage Tower. Putting the thought aside, he refocused on his work. After a quick meditation to restore energy, he smiled, ready to complete the Omnirune core. Like before, he formed a spiritual force bridge, this time between the transparent form of the greater rune floating in mindspace and the compression array in the Tear of Zon. Activate. He ordered the compression program to run, bracing for any powerful reaction. But compared to creating the Omnirune core, this activation was much gentler. All the runes, from basic to intermediate and finally advanced, were sucked into the singularity formed by the compression array program. However, rather than forming in the singularity, the rune mass transferred directly to the Omnirune core. No fanfare. Just as its mass had been stripped during the previous transfer, the reverse occurred, returning the mass to the greater rune. Alex's mind blanked briefly from the intensity of the transfer and the increasing weight of the Omnirune core on his mind space. When the final rune mass transferred, the Omnirune core signaled completeness. An intense golden light burst from within, spreading throughout Alex's mind space. Alex felt a moment of enlightenment. His understanding of runes deepened, especially his comprehension of the Omnirune core. I see, it's not power you have, but potential and versatility, Alex muttered, his voice distant. Because I imagined creating a self-learning AI rather than a rune of sheer strength. What was born was a rune that can become anything I make it. You can only form the compression array because that's all I've taught you. Numerous realizations settled deeply in Alex's mind. Slowly, his mind space began to shift. The affinity between his mind space and the Omnirune core grew exponentially. That was, until it hit a bottleneck. To break through, Alex had to make a choice. What was happening mirrored the metamorphosis a novice experiences when choosing a path. It was the same whether they were an acolyte, mage, or trainee warrior. If he continued on this path, Alex would close off his potential to all other possibilities, leaving only affinity for the Omnirune core. There's no turning back now. Do it, he ordered himself mentally. A mystical scene unfolded. The Omnirune core slowly sank into Alex's mind space, as if swallowed by quicksand. His mind pulsed like a transparent ocean in the midst of a raging storm. Once again, like previous breakthroughs during his Rune-Tech development, Alex blacked out. This time, however, no grand phenomenon manifested in the physical world. The changes were confined to Alex's mind and soul. His mind and soul underwent an unprecedented metamorphosis. At the boundaries of his mind space, once formed by an elastic, fluid-like membrane of psychic energy, any observer looking closely would see something new, atom-sized runes. Not just at the mind space edges, but also at the boundaries of his soul realm. In the most literal sense possible, Alex now possessed a mind and soul made of runes. When Alex woke, he realized the Omnirune was no longer a separate entity lodged in his mind space. It had become one with his mind space, as though it had existed with his mind from the very beginning. Now, under his will, the sun-like greater rune could decompress into a star cluster of lesser runes in his mind space and reform at a thought, giving his mind space a stellar flare. For the moment, that was its only trick. A blank slate, one Alex must inscribe himself. Its strength would depend entirely on how he nurtured it. In return, its potential felt limitless. Exactly what I need, he mused. Once I teach the Omnirune core to self-learn and self-modify, it'll become the platform I envisioned. Eager as he was to begin, one task came first. He threw on his acolyte overcoat robes and left the dorm, heading, out of long habit, for the Tower Master's office. One might expect that, after dueling Marcus Hatarian, Alex would be famous throughout the Enclave. The reality was starkly different. He could still roam the tower's halls without drawing attention like a celebrity, just like he wanted. It also helped that he avoided wearing the gold brooch that marked him as the Tower Master's official disciple. Of course, only acolytes and ordinary mags failed to recognize him now. The truly powerful knew exactly who he was, but such people wouldn't fawn over a mere acolyte, even if he was the Tower Master's official disciple. Alex walked the corridors with the same respectful air as any acolyte, the sole difference being that he was allowed to use the magic lifts and portals that granted him access to the upper floors where the Tower Master's office was located. As usual, Merlin was absent. Zora handled the paperwork alone. Lady Zora, busy as always, I see, Alex said, settling into a chair. 6 months in the tower had made him at ease in her presence. What brings you, Alex? She asked, smiling. Don't say it like that. You make it sound as if I only visit when something happens. That's because you do only visit when something happens, she replied, teasing. You never leave your pet project unless it's important. Alex chuckled. That's a fair point. I have been so fixated on my Rune-Tech project that I might as well be a hermit. Actually, I've completed another phase, he said. Her eyes widened. Already? Wasn't your plan to compress intermediate and advanced runes into the Omnirune core? Yes, it was. And I've done it, Alex confirmed, grin spreading. Is that so? Zora murmured, eyes briefly distant. No disruptive signs at all. Is it because his greater runes have already been accepted into the natural order, so creating more or improving on it doesn't warrant any fanfare? Then there's no need to worry about an uproar to manage, she mused, half relieved, half disappointed. Alex sensed the mix of emotions but couldn't fathom why finishing the Omnirune core would prompt such a mix. Is something wrong? He asked. Zora shook her head. Nothing serious, just thinking. So, what's next? The critical step, Alex said. Whether the project lives or dies depends on this step. For that reason, I've decided to going into seclusion to focus on the project until the deadline. I'll treat that as formal notice you'll miss your scheduled classes. Exactly. He hesitated. About the special meals you arranged, would it still be possible for them to keep coming? Don't worry. You'll receive them anywhere you choose to seclude within the enclave. Just focus on your goals, Merlin's voice echoed, though the legendary mage was nowhere to be found. Thank you, Master. Alex bowed toward the disembodied voice. I'll seclude in my dorm, he added to Zora. You're welcome to visit. Appreciated, but no, she replied, smiling. Finish your work first. We'll celebrate after you succeed. You'd like to start immediately, right? Don't fret about your friend, Asta. Yes? I'll have someone inform her of your seclusion. Though phrased as a suggestion, Alex felt a gentle compulsion behind the words. He nodded. Understood, Lady Zora. As the Tower Master's assistant, she did hold that authority, though she rarely used it. Zora helped him file the seclusion notice, and Alex withdrew behind closed doors with no loose ends left. Now came the decisive phase, writing the code that would awaken the Omnirune core, turning it into a self-learning, self-modifying entity capable of realizing the limitless platform he envisioned. Chapter 17, Omnirune Core AI. CH17 Omnirune Core AI. ******. Alex's ambition for the Omnirune core was simple in its phrasing, yet grand in its execution. He wanted to create a platform capable of interacting with the very laws of any dimension he might find himself in. A system that could learn, adapt, and eventually influence, perhaps even enforce, his will upon the laws that governed a world. A platform that would support him in becoming the strongest, no matter the dimension, world, realm, or plane he ventured into in the future. And what better candidate for such a foundation than artificial intelligence? But building a true AI from scratch was anything but easy. In his previous life, even tech giants, like the multinational corporation he once worked for, had to pour years, countless millions of dollars, and teams of elite engineers into developing a functioning AI from the ground up. AI had only become somewhat ubiquitous in his old world before his reincarnation because companies eventually released open-source models. These could be modified to suit a client's needs without having to reinvent the wheel from the ground. Technological infrastructure such as cloud services and GPU-renting computation farms had made it all affordable. Anyone with an internet connection and a bit of coding skill could now train a decent model. There were also extensive open libraries, curated by global AI enthusiast communities, designed specifically to accelerate AI learning. In short, Alex had none of that here. He wasn't deluded. He knew very well that building a complete AI in this world, where even the concept of computation was nascent, would be a titanic task. But he wasn't just anyone. He had been one of the lead engineers on his company's AI division before his death. He knew what he was doing, and, more importantly, he knew the timeline. He wasn't expecting to build a fully functioning AI in a single seclusion session, or even within a few months. It was a long-term endeavor. So why start now? Simple. Magic was a long-term process too. The Omnirune Core AI would serve as the very foundation of his magic. And just like AI development, magical advancement in this world was a slow, layered path that spanned a lifetime. Compared to investing decades mastering someone else's system, Alex would rather dedicate his life to something familiar, something that was his. Call it stubbornness, if you will. But it was his path. He would walk it on his own terms. In the earlier phases of his project, Alex had collected and curated a personal library of runes. Each rune had been tested, analyzed, and categorized like lines of executable code. Once he succeeded in storing and replicating the effects of those runes reliably, he reached an exhilarating conclusion. The rune system of this world was a programming language, one he didn't need to invent from scratch. To validate this theory, he had already created and executed a rudimentary program, his compression tool array, and it had functioned exactly as planned. Even better, the fact that this virtual tool existed solely within magical crystals such as the Morrow crystal and the Tear of Zon proved something critical. These materials were analogous to computation hardware. That meant he now had a working, Rune-compatible system, complete with both hardware and software. The next step? Introducing machine learning. The Omnirune core was a blank slate. For it to function as a learning, adaptive AI, Alex needed to instill it with instinctual behaviors, primitive subroutines that would shape its development. Using foundational machine learning principles, he planned to create runic array formations that encoded baseline behaviors. These instincts would form the base of the Omnirune core's intelligence. They wouldn't just allow it to learn and self-modify, they'd guide how it learned and evolved. Pattern recognition, error correction, time-based memory encoding, anomaly detection, confidence rating, reward-based reinforcement, contextual adaptation, ethical governance. Each of these core behaviors would be introduced into the system as individual, but interconnected and looping, runic arrays. It was a massive project. Insane, even. But Alex had both the theoretical grounding and real-world experience to see it through. He wasn't groping in the dark. Not this time. Tower Master's office, Dragonhold Mage Tower, Dragonhold Enclave. Zora was enjoying a rare moment of tranquility. With her schedule unusually light, she took the opportunity to refine her tea ceremony, an art she had quietly adopted from her father, Merlin. A soothing cup of tea while gazing out at the picturesque enclave below. It was a rare kind of serenity she had come to treasure deeply. She was not one who craved excitement. Peace and stillness were more than enough for her. In fact, her primary motivation for shouldering much of Merlin's workload had always been to protect this very calm, to safeguard the peaceful haven that had allowed her to bloom. Yet, in recent times, that haven had been stirred by an unexpected element, an overachieving 10-year-old boy. Zora had always been praised as a genius. But her accomplishments, however brilliant, still fell within the bounds of reason. Alex Fury, however, had broken those bounds entirely. A child discarded by his own family, deemed worthless, had gone on to inscribe his theories and inventions directly into the very fabric of the natural order. At heart, the boy was surprisingly similar to her. He too cherished quiet moments and meaningful solitude. But the creations that emerged from his hands were anything but peaceful. Zora let out a quiet chuckle. It had been 4 months since Alex entered seclusion for the next stage of his project. Since then, life at the Mage Tower had returned to its calm, serene rhythm. And yet, the more peaceful things became, the more certain she was that this calm was merely the prelude to a storm. She had no doubt that Alex, this curious boy she'd come to view like a younger brother, would soon emerge with something groundbreaking. The only question was how absurd it would be this time. He should be out soon. It's already been over 11 months since he began training under father. Only 2 weeks left till the deadline, she mused. Then the realization hit her. 2 weeks? Doesn't that mean his birthday is this week? She muttered aloud. She mentally counted the days. Wait, his birthday is today. She blinked in mild shock, then sighed. Too bad he's still in seclusion. From what she'd learned, Alex had rarely celebrated his birthday back in the Fury household. In fact, birthdays didn't seem to matter in that family at all. She had hoped to mark his first birthday in the Mage Tower, something small, a gesture to reward his hard work. But clearly, that would have to wait. Knock Tilda. Come in, she said. The door opened, revealing a familiar presence, but with an unfamiliar visage. How have you been, Lady Zora? The person said with a calm smile. Zora stared. Alex. What? It's only been a few months and you don't recognize me anymore? I'm hurt. Alex joked as he strolled in and took a seat. Zora looked him over, blinking in disbelief. The Alex before her was vastly different from the boy who had entered seclusion. Now standing nearly as tall as her, around 160 centimeters to her 177 centimeters, he carried a broader frame and a more grounded presence. His hair had grown out, sweeping into bangs that lightly obscured his eyes, while the back reached his shoulders in soft waves. If one didn't know better, they'd never guess he was only 10, no, 11, years old. How can I not be surprised? Look at you, you've practically caught up to me in height. Alex gave her a thin smile. He'd be lying if he said he wasn't pleased with how quickly his body was maturing. The sooner he could shed his awkward, adolescent form, the better. He was an adult in spirit, and he was eager for his body to reflect that. He suspected the meals Merlin had been preparing were behind the rapid growth. Something about the food felt transformative. He couldn't explain it, not precisely, but the results spoke for themselves. Of course, part of him worried about the side effects of such accelerated development. But if there was one person he trusted with such decisions, it was his master, the legendary mage himself. So? Zora asked, leaning forward. So? Alex replied, feigning ignorance. You're out of seclusion. Were you successful or not? Alex grinned. I've achieved my goal, he said confidently. I've laid the foundation for Rune-Tech. Zora couldn't help but smile. I want to show Master the results of my work. Can you help me reach him? Okay, Zora nodded. She was about to reach for a device on her table when Merlin's voice cut through the room. Don't worry. I am here. Merlin stepped out of a shimmering portal, as usual. I was alerted when you came out of seclusion. I thought you'd take some time to catch up on what you missed, but you didn't. You came straight here. I don't know whether to praise your determination and work ethic, or worry about your development. Alex shrugged. Submitting the proof of concept for my Rune-Tech project has a deadline. Admiring changes during seclusion doesn't. Merlin shook his head, clearly feeling his point had flown over the boy's head. So, instead, he said, are you sure your Rune-Tech has reached a level where it can provide a suitable proof of concept? You'll only get one chance. I am sure, Alex said confidently. All right. Merlin waved his hand and opened a portal to another location. It looked like a practice room, but it was huge, even larger than the arena used for dragon duels. This is my private practice room. The construction materials and arrays here can withstand grade 12 spells just fine. You're free to let loose. Alex's eyes widened. Grade 10 spells were considered the pinnacle, cast only by legends, those who commanded the very laws of the world. But now Merlin was saying this room could withstand grade 12 spells? Does that mean you can cast grade 12 spells? Alex wondered, looking at his master in awe. How strong is this legendary mage teacher of mine? Merlin caught the boy's thoughts and stroked his long grey beard with a small amused smile. Zora rolled her eyes at her adoptive father's humble bragging antics. You're so old, yet so childish, she admonished inwardly. So, what do you have to show? Merlin gestured to Alex. The boy shook off his surprise, and his confident smile returned. He stepped forward into the practice area. Grade 2 spell, Fireball. Grade 2 spell, Windball. To Merlin and Zora's surprise, Alex instant cast 2 beginner mage-level spells, simultaneously. What Merlin especially noted was that Alex didn't force the spells. He had complete control as the 2 balls floated a few meters overhead. But Alex wasn't finished. Special fusion spell, Inferno. Chapter 18, Rune-Tech's Rune Mastery. Ch 18, Rune-Tech's Rune Mastery. *****. Spell fusion spell, Inferno. Under the spirit sight ability of his truth-seeker eyes, Alex watched intently as the runic spell circles beneath both spells twisted and pulled together, fusing into one unified formation. The resulting spell orb had a deeper, more menacing red than a regular fireball, and a visible swirl of wind surrounded it like a miniature cyclone. Without hesitation, Alex fired the spell. The projectile tore through the air with a speed that rivaled a windball. Then, boom! Merlin and Zora's eyes widened in absolute shock as the spell exploded in the distance. The blast carried both the fiery detonation of a fireball and the powerful knockback of a windball. The result was a much wider radius of destruction and a significantly stronger force behind the blast wave. The damage caused by the spell far exceeded what any ordinary grade 2 spell could produce. Did a novice just fire a spell with the destructive power of a grade 4 spell? Zora muttered, barely believing what she had witnessed. She knew Alex would pull something shocking and insane. But this was too much. Almost on cue, both she and Merlin turned to look at the boy. Alex was panting, his shoulders rising and falling with each breath. It was clear the spell hadn't come easily. Of course. How could it be easy to cast a peak intermediate rank spell without consequences? Zora comforted herself. She conveniently ignored the fact that the only consequence Alex seemed to suffer was rapid mana depletion. Which, considering the result, was practically nothing. Merlin remained silent, replaying the spell sequence in his mind. His eyes sparkled as he slowly pieced together the secret behind Alex's technique. Before he could speak, however, Zora blurted out, "How did you pull off multicasting? And how were you even able to cast grade 2 spells to begin with?" Alex took 5 slow, deliberate breaths, deep in, deep out. With each cycle, the fatigue visibly eased from his body. Once again, he had his durable spiritual force to thank for his rapid recovery. "Technically, I didn't multicast," he replied. "I cast the Fireball spell, and the Omnirune Core cast the Windball. As for how I was able to cast a grade 2 spell, it just came naturally. I think one of my bloodlines has a high fire affinity. Casting the Fireball felt instinctive and cost me far less mana than it should have. With that experience, I taught the Omnirune Core to cast the Windball spell. It was just a matter of replicating the spell formation, something that's second nature to the greater rune. Actually," Alex continued, "those spells weren't what I really wanted to show. It was your control over runes and spell formations," Merlin said. As expected of a legendary mage, he noticed immediately. Alex smiled inwardly. "Combination spells exist," Merlin continued. "Multiple mags can pool their mana to create powerful effects. But that's not what you did. Instead of combining the resulting spell phenomena, the effects, you fused the spell formations themselves. That's a completely different concept." He fixed his eyes on the boy. "That's why you called it a special fusion spell, not a combination spell. You didn't just merge the effects of 2 spells. You fused them at their intrinsic level, the spell structure, the runic framework. What you've shown is just a fusion of basic elemental spells. But if you can do this with higher grade spells, with abstract concepts, domains, or laws. I see. That's the proof of concept you wanted to present." Alex's smile deepened. As expected of a legendary mage, I didn't need to explain. He understood right away. As the saying went, it was easy to speak with the intelligent. "How many times can you cast such a fusion spell?" Merlin asked. "I can force it and overdraft my mana. Twice. Thrice, if I'm willing to push myself to the edge." Merlin nodded, thoughtful. "And that limit will only improve as he ranks up." "This isn't bad, but I expected more," Merlin said, a teasing glint in his eye. Alex smirked. "I never said that was all." He turned to Zora. "Could you please cast any grade 2 spell, or lower?" Zora nodded, but a flicker of pride lit her eyes. She didn't want to simply cast a spell and be looked down upon by her little brother. So, with a graceful wave of her hand, a meter-long shard of ice formed in the air. Grade 2 spell, Ice Bolt, silent instant cast. Alex's face twitched. Why do father and daughter have to show off? He quickly reacted. Cancel. The ice bolt vanished in an instant. Zora raised an eyebrow. I can manipulate not only the runes of my own spell circles, but also those of others, so long as they're within the range of my spiritual force and I have at least half the mana they use to cast the spell, Alex explained calmly. He felt the sudden urge to show off a bit himself. I can not only cancel the spell, I can alter it, reshaping the output to make it weaker or stronger. That means I can hijack a spell and use it as my own, without casting it. I see. Your Omnirune core is pushing for absolute control over runes, Merlin remarked, stroking his chin. Somewhat, Alex replied with a small nod. That concludes the demonstration of what Rune-Tech can do for me. Next, I'll show you what I can do for others through Rune-Tech. Both Zora and Merlin visibly perked up. They remembered Alex mentioning his goal, to create a platform that not only enhanced his power but also empowered his future forces. So far, the results from Rune-Tech in boosting his own strength were remarkable, more than enough to elevate him above his peers. The father-daughter duo were eager to see whether his methods for empowering others would be just as groundbreaking. Alex reached into his waist bag and pulled out a small, palm-sized metallic brick, handing it to Zora. Please hold on to this for now. I'll need it for the next demonstration. Zora nodded, accepting the device. Then Alex pulled out a larger brick, 3 times the size of the one he gave her, and placed it on the ground between Zora and Merlin. After setting it down, he jogged across the vast training hall, easily the size of 2 football stadiums. Panting lightly when he reached the other side, Alex pulled out a small orb from his bag and spoke into it. Lady Zora, Master, can you hear me? If you can, please fire an ice bolt into the air. Moments later, he spotted a familiar shard of ice arc into the sky. Good. I know you have questions, but first, channel your mana and spiritual force into the trinket I gave you. You should see 2 options. Use your spiritual force to select the one with my name. Shortly after, Alex felt a vibration from his waist bag. He reached in and retrieved a brick identical to the one he'd handed to Zora. What do you think of the trinket I made? Oh, this one can transmit voice, so feel free to reply, he said, speaking into the device. Alex, is that you? Came Zora's voice from the device. Yes. This is a small communication device I created. We can talk in real time with minimal mana consumption, thanks to Rune-Tech. I call it a phone. I don't even know what to say anymore. Zora sighed from the other end. I'm opening a portal. Come back. Merlin's voice followed shortly after. A portal shimmered into existence before Alex, perfectly stable and accurate. He stepped through, and in a blink, was back before Zora and Merlin. Alex stood proudly before them, grinning from ear to ear. I realized something early on. Distant communication is extremely inconvenient. Most methods aren't instant and take time to deliver. And when they are instantaneous, they consume a lot of mana and are outrageously expensive. He raised a finger for each point as he continued. Thanks to my Rune-Tech programming, I managed to design a series of rune circuits that made both devices possible. 1. A microphone circuit to capture sound and convert it into a mana-based signal. 2. A transmitter circuit to send that signal to a corresponding device. 3. A receiver circuit to pick up the signal. 4. A speaker circuit to convert the signal back into sound. 5. A power circuit that draws energy from the user's mana or a mana stone. And 6. A tuning circuit, to make sure only the correct caller and receiver are connected. He beamed with pride. I combined all of these into a single greater rune, the phone rune. Merlin and Zora were silent, absorbing the implications. Unlike the Omnirune core, which is exclusive to me, this phone rune can be taught to others. That means this communication tool can be mass-produced. Alex smiled with quiet satisfaction. To him, a modern man, the idea of relying on slow messengers or inefficient magical communication was unbearable. It felt like a duty, no, a mission, to fix this flaw in the world. And he had done just that. Oh, and by the way, he added offhandedly, I plan to reach a sales agreement with the tower regarding the phone rune and its general address variant. You're selling it to the tower? Zora blinked, clearly surprised. Yes, but that's a matter for another time, after this presentation. I still have one last creation to show you. This one. His eyes gleamed. Is the prototype of a device I believe will revolutionize my future forces. Chapter 19, Rune Tattoo. CH19, Rune Tattoo. ****. Before his reincarnation, one of the major projects Rune-Sage had been developing was something known as the Smart Tattoo Project, or SmartTat, as the team affectionately called it. His homeland's military had issued a call for next-generation embedded technologies that could redefine the battlefield of information warfare, particularly in espionage, data security, and decentralized communication. Numerous concepts were pitched to the brass at the Department of Defense. One idea proposed a tattoo embedded with a proprietary barcode or QR code pattern. When scanned by a specialized device, the pattern would trigger access to a remote databank, hosted either on a private server or cloud storage system. Simple, secure, but underwhelming. Another approach involved implanting a near-field communication (NFC) chip just beneath the skin, usually in soft tissue like the forearm or shoulder. A tattoo would then be inked over the site, serving purely as camouflage or a visual marker. Data could then be accessed with a compatible NFC reader or smartphone. Functional, yes, but lacking flair. Alex's design team, however, wasn't satisfied with the safe route. They were tech visionaries and unapologetic anime nerds. Inspired by the ancestral and totemic tattoos often seen on orcs and barbarians in their favorite games and comics, they asked a simple question. What if the tattoo wasn't just a key to power, but power itself? Their proposed system involved tattoo ink laced with nanotech, specifically, nanochips capable of storing and processing data. The ink mixture also included conductive materials like graphene, which formed functional circuits within the skin. The result? A living circuit, one that turned skin into an active electronic interface. But the team didn't stop there. These smart tats weren't just data storage. They could be programmed with sensors, microcommunications, or even set to deliver viral code or disruptive programs when scanned, offensive and defensive cyber warfare tools, right on your body. Needless to say, their proposal wowed the generals. With just a little corporate lobbying, the SmartTat project was greenlit. And in the final months before his unexpected reincarnation, Alex and his design team of anime-obsessed nerds had completed a working prototype. Why was any of this relevant? Simple. Alex now lived in a world ruled by swords and magic, a world where totemic and ancestral tattoos were real and deeply ingrained in the cultures of many races. Wildkin species such as orcs, ogres, and trolls bore ancestral tattoos passed down through bloodlines. These tattoos weren't decorative, they were sources of strength, enhancing the bearer's physical and magical capabilities. And yet, humans had no such equivalent. Back on Earth, he had nearly succeeded in creating smart tattoos for a mana-less world. So why couldn't he do the same here, where mana was abundant and magic was reality? He retrieved the last item from his bag, a tightly rolled rune scroll. "This is a rune tattoo scroll," Alex announced. He paused, then smiled. "Rather than explain it, it's easier, and way more fun, to show you." He turned to Merlin. "Can you teleport us to the Outer Ring Farms? I've set up a demonstration there." Merlin gave a short nod. His perception spread outwards in a wave, reaching for the location Alex had marked. Within moments, he locked on and opened a shimmering portal. The trio stepped through into a humble stretch of farmland on the outskirts of the enclave. The land was plain, rows of tilled soil, wooden fences, and minimal infrastructure. Mundane crops were grown here in small plots. Surprisingly, they still used beasts of burden, oxen, to help with the work. The enclave certainly had magical tools that could replace these methods, but this settlement served a different purpose. It wasn't just about growing food. It was about the people. These farms kept the enclave's ordinary, non-professional citizens, those neither trained in magic nor the sword, engaged and provided for. Occasionally, one of these mundane folk gave birth to a child with mage or warrior potential. They were the hidden seedbeds of new blood, and so they were treated with quiet dignity and support. Alex had rented this small plot to test something special, his Rune-Tech version of the Smart Tattoo project. 2 large oxen stood at rest, each harnessed to a plow. Alex stepped forward and guided them into motion, his movements familiar and controlled. The oxen obeyed, trudging forward and dragging their plows through the soil. It quickly became obvious. One of the oxen was much stronger than the other. It worked faster, dug deeper, and barely strained. Alex stopped them both. "Grade 0 spell, sleep." He muttered the incantation, and both beasts collapsed into gentle slumber. Stepping forward, he pressed the rune scroll against the side of the weaker ox, just behind its foreleg. The scroll flared to life, glowing with a soft but intense light. When it faded, the ox's fur had burned away in a precise circle, and in its place was a rune tattoo inked directly into the flesh. The symbol was elegant and alien, pulsing faintly with mana. Zora leaned closer, brow raised. That's a rune, but it looks strange. Merlin's eyes narrowed. Is that a greater rune? Yes, Alex replied proudly. But not just any greater rune. It's designed to bind to a living being and enhance its physical capacity by drawing directly from ambient mana. He dispelled the sleep spell. The oxen stirred, groggily rising to their feet. Alex urged them forward once more. This time, the previously weaker ox surged into motion. Its steps were smoother, stronger, faster. It plowed effortlessly, leaving the other ox behind in both speed and precision. Even the ox seemed confused by its newfound vitality. Its wide eyes and enthusiastic gait suggested it felt the difference. It was like it had been reborn, young again, stronger than ever, and ready to work all day without strain. Zora and Merlin exchanged glances, then turned to stare at Alex. As if on cue, with a confident smile tugging at his lips, Alex continued his explanation. As you both know, the Fury lands border territories held by wildkin, many of whom use totemic tattoos to empower themselves. That always puzzled me. Why do only certain wildkin races possess such tattoos? Why don't the arguably more intelligent races, humans, elves, dwarfs, use them? He paused, glancing at Merlin and Zora. These tattoos, they're much too similar to runes. In fact, some in the magical academia already theorize that they are runes, just in a different script, much like dialects in a different language. So why can't we replicate them? He let the question hang in the air a moment before answering it himself. That's when I realized something important. Orcs, trolls, ogres, these wildkin who wield totemic tattoos all share one trait: incredibly strong and resilient bodies. Meanwhile, races like humans, elves, and dwarfs, despite their intelligence, have comparatively fragile physiques. He pointed toward the plowing oxen in the distance. In that case, the answer became clear. The raw power encoded in these tattoos puts immense strain on the body. Without the necessary physical resilience, the bearer would break down, possibly even die. Merlin gave a slow, almost unconscious nod. The logic was sound. But then I asked myself, why hasn't anyone solved this problem? Runes have been researched by humans, elves, and dwarfs for millennia. Surely someone would have tried adjusting the power output to suit weaker bodies. He shook his head. No one succeeded. Not until I completed the Omnirune core and my affinity with runes deepened. That's when I had an epiphany. He held up a finger. The tattoos used by wildkins are crude runic circuits. They lack the complexity needed to regulate the toll they take on a weaker body. Only an array has that level of precision and control. But that brings us to a new challenge. Arrays are massive. You can't draw something that intricate on a human body. It's simply too big and too complex. Then came the smirk. Well, that used to be the case, until I created my greater runes. Merlin's eyes gleamed with sudden understanding. You compressed an array circle into a greater rune. Alex grinned. Exactly. I call it the rune tattoo. He gestured toward the ox again. This one's a strength tattoo. It boosts physical strength by 20 to 50%. And this is just the beginning. I plan to create rune tattoos for other attributes: agility, endurance, vitality, perception, and more. He crouched slightly, growing more animated. One more thing. I also modified the detection spell used by enchanters, forgesmiths, and runesmiths. Normally it's used to check how many enchantments or runes an item can support. He straightened, pride in his voice. My version can scan living beings, animals, people. It determines how many rune tattoos a body can safely bear. A quick scan after I emerged from seclusion showed that the average person in the tower could support 3 rune tattoos. Zora's eyes widened in realization. That means, with the right combination of tattoos, Alex said, someone could overwhelm their peers at the same level, or even take on those ranked higher. Exactly. Zora chimed in. It would be a complete game changer. Alex nodded, his grin widening. And these are just tier 1 rune tattoos. As I grow stronger and more skilled, I'll develop higher tier versions, more powerful, more refined, more revolutionary. He turned to Merlin, now visibly eager. So, Master, did I meet your expectations? Merlin remained silent, his gaze shifting back to the previously old and tired ox. The beast was plowing with the energy of youth, each motion fluid and powerful. If a single rune tattoo could do this, what could 2 accomplish? 3? 4? His mind raced, not with excitement, but with possibilities and consequences. What if the bearer wasn't a beast of burden? What if it was a professional, a trained mage or warrior? In a battle between equals, rune tattoos could be the deciding factor. With multiple tattoos, a talented individual could even defeat opponents far above their level. But then Merlin's eyes narrowed. He'd noticed something Alex hadn't. Tell me, Alex, he said slowly, can your rune tattoos be used by non-professionals? Chapter 20, Rune-Tech Business. CH20 Rune-Tech Business. *****. The world of Pangaea was home to countless races and creatures. From humans to the myriad intelligent and semi-intelligent species, the ones known as professionals, those who rose to become mags, warriors, or other empowered beings, comprised only a small fraction of the total population. Among humans, particularly within the vast Varelian Empire, professionals were highly coveted. Nobles, military corps, and powerful organizations competed fiercely to recruit these rare individuals, forming elite forces around them. However, the truth remained, there would never be enough professionals to meet the needs of empire or ambition. As a result, ordinary citizens, non-professionals, were also recruited into standing armies. They occupied the lower rungs, providing bulk and numbers. They were the foot soldiers, the garrison guards, the ever-replaceable frontline cannon fodder. On rare occasions, these non-professionals attained sudden breakthroughs, moments of life-or-death epiphany that allowed them to awaken professionals, be it a mage or warrior. But such miracles were exceedingly rare. The bulk of any force would always remain non-professionals. This undeniable fact was one of the key reasons why powerful noble families often sought planar coordinates, gateways to other worlds, to plunder resources and, more crucially, to seek out those with talent to become professionals to fill their ranks. Even in the renowned Dragonhold Enclave, the Mage Tower scholars and combat mags made up only a tiny percentage of the total population. The true mass of the Enclave's citizenry consisted of non-professional family members of mags, skilled artisans, and common folk who had migrated into the Enclave's lands seeking protection. It was through this growing tide of ordinary people that the Dragonhold Enclave expanded to become the influential territory it was today. Yet across all the empires, organizations, and territories within the realm of Pangaea, one truth stood firm. The barrier to becoming a professional was an uncontrollable and deeply unfair one: innate talent. It was a wall no amount of money, effort, or status could consistently breach. Talent was nature's greatest gift, and its cruelest joke. The right talent could change a person's fate overnight. Yet it also allowed the lazy and arrogant to eclipse the diligent and devoted. It was often said, hard work could get you to the elite rank, just beneath great mage or veteran warrior, but no further. Beyond that, you needed talent, and more importantly, luck, opportunity, and enlightenment. In short, no matter how hard one worked, without the blessing of talent, they would likely remain stuck below the highest ranks. What a cruel joke indeed. But Alex's rune tattoo changed everything. Even if only temporarily, it offered non-professionals and talent-limited professionals the chance to taste the higher realms of power. And that taste could lead to more. Because once someone had seen what was possible, even briefly, they were far more likely to pursue it with obsession. Some might even succeed where they previously had no hope. In other words, Alex's rune tattoo was a game changer. It could significantly increase the number of new professionals, and it could also push existing professionals higher than they could have otherwise reached. But as Alex mulled over Merlin's earlier question, he slowly shook his head. I wouldn't advise it, he admitted. Although internal energy isn't required to receive a rune tattoo, I suspect it's still needed to sustain it. My current design focuses on passive effects, always active, which means they'll constantly draw on the user's energy. A non-professional won't have the reserves to bear the toll for long. He paused, frowning in thought. Now that I think about it, even among the wildkin, only their professionals seem to possess ancestral tattoos. Their non-professionals don't have them. As if to underscore his words, a sudden sound drew his attention. The ox, still spotting its strength tattoo, had collapsed, sides heaving violently, eyes wild with strain. If nothing changed soon, it would die from sheer exhaustion. Reacting quickly, Alex fetched a bundle of fresh hay and laid it in front of the beast. The ox gobbled it down desperately, but it was clear it wasn't enough. Its body had pushed beyond its limits. Moments later, Alex led the animal into a nearby barn and ended its suffering cleanly. A mercy, though a painful one. That was the cost of power without foundation. He stepped outside, face somber. Merlin met his gaze and gave a silent nod of approval and understanding. Alex walked back and quietly placed a handful of gold coins in a carved bowl beside the barn door. Compensation for the ox, far more than it was worth, but necessary all the same. A lesson had been learned. Merlin activated a portal with a silent flick of his hand, and the trio returned to the enclave. Alex stood before his master, awaiting Merlin's evaluation. The old mage gave him a small nod. Your demonstration was quite entertaining. I can't deny that your Rune-Tech shows strong potential. But I hope you don't intend to stop here. The road to the pinnacle of magic is long and treacherous. I understand, Alex replied with a steady nod. Good. As promised, I'll assist you with your bloodline conflict. In the meantime, you're free to proceed to the beginner rank using Rune-Tech, if you're truly committed to walking this path to the end. Thank you, Master. Alex bowed respectfully. There's no need to thank me. This is the fruit of your own work. Merlin gave a gracious wave of his hand, then turned slightly as if to depart. Still, you'd best settle your sales agreement first. I can't say how long addressing your bloodline issue will take. He was moments from stepping through a conjured portal when Alex called out. Master, wait. You need to be present for the discussion. Merlin paused, raising a bushy eyebrow. I'm not just selling the phone rune and public address rune, Alex explained. I've got a much bigger project I believe the Enclave will be interested in. Another Rune-Tech invention? Merlin asked, intrigued. It could be, Alex answered cryptically, if you approve of the concept. Oh ho! Merlin stroked his long grey beard, eyes glinting with interest. He dismissed the portal and made his way to the Tower Master's chair, settling in with a regal air. At his nod, Zora sent out a summons for the Enclave's chief financial officer, Baldric Pinchcoin. A few minutes later, a polite knock came at the door. The moment it opened, a familiar figure waddled into the room. Baldric Pinchcoin, the Enclave's most money-minded gnome, paused as his nose twitched wildly, overwhelmed by the scent of profit. It wasn't just Merlin's usual aura of wealth and power. There was something volatile and tantalizing coming from Alex. The potent blend of established fortune and new, unstable promise sent a thrill through the gnome's finely tuned senses. He took a beat to compose himself, then bowed deeply, his usual reserved demeanor replaced by an energy Zora had never seen in him, and Merlin rarely had. The gnome's instincts were screaming, there's gold in this room. Lots of it. Greetings, most exalted Tower Master, Lady Zora, Master Alex, he said with exaggerated reverence. Alex stepped forward with a warm smile. Welcome, Master Pinchcoin. I hope you've been well. I truly can't thank you enough for the assistance you and your department have given me. Oh, think nothing of it, Master Alex, Pinchcoin replied humbly, though his tone was just as eager. We were only doing our duty. No, I must insist. The tear of Zon you helped me acquire was pivotal in my research. Alex smiled with deliberate implication. A glint passed through the gnome's sharp eyes. You've completed it. I have, Alex confirmed. We were just discussing its future when I remembered your offer to help monetize it. He paused, then added, that offer still stands, I hope. Pinchcoin's eyes lit up like a gambler on a winning streak. But of course, Master Alex, he said, rubbing his hands together in delight. In that case, please, let's sit and discuss. Alex gestured confidently to a nearby seat, acting as though he owned the office. Zora and Merlin exchanged amused glances. There was something strangely endearing and impressive about the boy. One moment, he was just a curious child. The next, a visionary inventor. And now, a seasoned negotiator. Watching him and Pinchcoin circle each other with pleasantries and flattery was like watching two foxes sizing each other up before a deal. After another round of subtle praise and diplomatic back and forth, the two finally settled into proper discussion, with Merlin and Zora quietly observing from the Tower Master's desk. As the Enclave's chief financial officer, Baldric Pinchcoin handled the majority of its internal and external trade arrangements. With Merlin's or Zora's approval, he had full authority to negotiate and finalize deals. Their presence in the room was, in essence, a silent endorsement of whatever agreement would follow. I've got a few products, fruits of my research, that I'd like to entrust to the Enclave for sales, both internally and externally, Alex said, reaching forward. He placed the brick phone, the spherical microphone, and the large brick speaker of the public address setup on the table. Then, he explained their functions and uses in detail. So, these can be operated by non-professionals as well? Pinchcoin asked, intrigued. Yes, Alex confirmed. In their current form, they need a mana stone for power. But with the next iteration, we can integrate a mana battery that slowly recharges from ambient mana. That'll bring them within reach of ordinary folk. Pinchcoin's ears twitched. What's the target demographic, nobles or? I want them to become ubiquitous, Alex interrupted confidently. For that reason, I'm adding a condition to the contract. The phones must be sold at just above cost price, accounting only for logistics and marketing. He leaned forward, eyes gleaming with purpose. Rather than profiting from phone sales, we'll earn from recharge subscriptions. Pinchcoin tilted his head. Recharge subscriptions. For every second of talk time, a set amount of credit is deducted from the phone's balance. Once the credit runs out, the phone won't be able to make calls unless it's recharged. These credits will be sold in exchange for gold or equivalent resources through our stores, or approved partners. The gnome's eyes positively sparkled. I see. By selling the phones cheap, we'll flood the market. Once people have them, they'll have to recharge to keep using them. It becomes a self-sustaining loop. At first, it won't look like much, but in the long run. He leaned back, visibly impressed. Brilliant. Alex chuckled. To him, this was basic business 101. Back in his old world, this sort of model was commonplace. Tech and telecom companies thrived off it. In fact, this was just scratching the surface of how tech giants made their fortunes. Sadly, most of those advanced methods weren't feasible yet in this world. Not with the current infrastructure. But that would change. If no one else would build that infrastructure, he would. Because raising the technological standards of this world wasn't just a dream, it was a goal. A mission. A stepping stone to reshape everything. Which was exactly why he had another ambitious project in mind. What are your terms? Pinchcoin finally asked, the question that mattered most. Alex shook his head. I'm not finished presenting my offer just yet. He turned to Merlin. This next project is why I asked the Tower Master to remain present. Then proceed, Merlin said, folding his arms. The three adults leaned in slightly, bracing themselves for whatever came next from the boy who kept defying their expectations. Guys, if you are still with us, then please subscribe to this channel and join our Discord and Patreon. It highly motivates me to make more audiobooks.